You've been explaining yourself your entire life. Every decision, every choice, every boundary you set. You hand them a detailed manual of your thoughts, your reasoning, your vulnerabilities. You think it makes you reasonable. It makes you weak. The moment you start explaining, you've already lost. You're not clarifying, you're apologizing for existing. You're not being understood, you're being dissected. Every word you offer becomes ammunition they'll use later. Every justification you give tells them exactly where to press to make you crack. Watch a man with real power. He doesn't explain why he won't attend their gathering. He doesn't justify why he refuses their request. He doesn't elaborate on his boundaries. He simply states what is. No, I'm not available. That doesn't work for me. The conversation ends there. Not because he's rude, because he understands something you don't. Your time, your energy, your presence, these aren't up for debate. They're not democratic decisions where everyone gets a vote. They're yours to allocate. When you explain why you're saying no, you're essentially saying, here's how you can convince me to say yes next time. You're giving them the blueprint to your resistance. The weak explain because they need approval. They need others to understand their logic, to validate their choices, to agree with their reasoning. This is the psychology of a child seeking permission from adults. You are not a child. You don't need their permission to live your life according to your values. Strong men don't explain because they don't need to be understood by everyone. They understand themselves. Their decisions come from a place of clarity about their priorities, their boundaries, their mission. When you know who you are and what you stand for, external validation becomes irrelevant noise. Stop handing them the map to your mind. Stop giving them detailed tours of your thought process. Your reasons are yours. Your boundaries exist whether they comprehend them or not. Your decisions stand whether they approve or not. The moment you realize you owe no one an explanation for living your life is the moment you reclaim your power.
You think explaining makes you the reasonable one in the room. It doesn't. It makes you the one who's still seeking their approval, the one who believes their understanding matters more than your autonomy. This is where most men lose the game before it even begins. Here's what happens when you explain. You reveal your decision-making process. They learn exactly which buttons to push. They discover your pressure points. They map out your reasoning so they can attack it piece by piece. You think you're being transparent? You're being strategic suicide. The powerful never explain because they understand a fundamental truth. Explanation implies justification is necessary. It suggests your choice might be wrong and needs defending. It positions you as someone who must prove their worth to proceed. This is the framework of weakness. Consider this. When you explain why you won't lend them money, you're not just saying no, you're teaching them exactly how to manipulate you into saying yes. When you justify why you need time alone, you're not setting a boundary, you're showing them how to guilt you into abandoning it. What's your relationship with explanation? Do you find yourself automatically justifying every choice you make? Do you feel guilty when others don't understand your decisions? Do you believe you owe people detailed breakdowns of your thought process? If yes to any of these, you've been conditioned to seek permission for your own life. The shift happens when you realize that your choices don't require external validation to be valid. Your boundaries don't need their comprehension to be real. Your priorities don't need their agreement to matter. This isn't about being difficult or mysterious. It's about understanding that your life belongs to you. Stop explaining your workout schedule. Stop justifying your career choices. Stop defending your relationships. Stop breaking down your financial decisions. Stop giving detailed reasons for your availability or unavailability. Your life is not a courtroom where you must present evidence for every choice. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you stop being managed by others' opinions. It's the moment you transition from someone who seeks approval to someone who simply lives according to his principles. This transition is everything. Every explanation you give is a negotiation you've already lost. You've moved from a position of authority to a position of defense, from stating reality to arguing for it. This is the difference between men who command respect and men who beg for understanding. Watch how this plays out in real life. The man who explains why he can't work late gets questioned, pressured, guilt-tripped. The man who simply says, "I'm not available," gets acceptance. One invites debate, the other states fact. One positions his choice as potentially wrong, the other positions it as reality. Your explanations create hierarchy. When you explain, you position the other person as judge of your choices. You're essentially saying their approval matters more than your autonomy. You're submitting your decisions for their review. This is psychological submission disguised as politeness. The addiction to explaining comes from a fear of being misunderstood. But here's the reality. Being misunderstood by some people is inevitable and irrelevant. Their misunderstanding doesn't change the validity of your choice. Their confusion doesn't make your boundary less real. Their disagreement doesn't make your priority less important. You explain because you want to be liked. You justify because you fear conflict. You elaborate because you need their blessing. All of this comes from the same source, the belief that their opinion of you matters more than your own standards for yourself. This belief will destroy every ounce of personal power you possess. When you stop explaining, something interesting happens. People respect you more, not less. They stop testing your boundaries because they realize those boundaries aren't up for discussion. They stop pressuring you because they understand your decisions aren't subject to their approval. This doesn't mean being cold or dismissive. It means being clear and final. No is a complete sentence. I'm not interested requires no follow-up. That doesn't work for me needs no elaboration. These statements are not rude, they're honest. They're not harsh, they're clear. The man who explains gives others power over his choices. The man who simply states his reality keeps that power for himself. Which one are you? Your explanations have become their weapons. Every time you justify a boundary, you hand them the tools to dismantle it. Every time you elaborate on a decision, you give them the ammunition to attack it. You think transparency builds trust. It builds vulnerability they will exploit. The psychology is simple. When you explain, you imply your decision might be wrong. You suggest it's open for debate. You position yourself as someone whose choices need external validation to be legitimate. This is exactly how they want you to think. Notice how children operate. They don't explain why they want something, they simply want it. They don't justify their preferences, they have them. They don't elaborate on their boundaries, they enforce them. Somewhere along the way, you were taught this directness was wrong. You were conditioned to seek approval for your own life. But the most successful men understand something crucial. Your choices don't require consensus. Your boundaries don't need unanimous approval. Your priorities don't have to make sense to everyone else. The moment you accept this is the moment you reclaim your personal sovereignty. When someone pushes back against your unexplained decision, they're testing whether you truly own it or whether you're just pretending. Your explanation tells them you're pretending. Your silence tells them you're serious. Your justification says, "Please understand." Your firmness says, "This is reality." The fear of being seen as unreasonable drives most of your explaining. But reasonable to whom? By whose standards? The people pressuring you to justify your choices often have agendas that conflict with your best interests. Why would you submit your decisions to judges who don't want you to succeed? Stop explaining your career moves to people who haven't built what you're building. Stop justifying your relationship choices to people who don't understand your values. Stop defending your lifestyle to people who don't share your vision. Their confusion is not your emergency. Your energy is finite. Every moment spent explaining is a moment not executing. Every conversation defending your choices is a conversation not advancing your goals.
Every justification you offer is focus stolen from your mission. This is time theft disguised as social obligation. The transition from explainer to executor changes everything. It transforms you from someone seeking permission to someone stating reality, from someone arguing for his choices to someone simply making them.
You explain, because you've been programmed to believe your choices are subject to public approval. This programming started early. Teachers demanded explanations for your behavior. Parents required justifications for your preferences. Authority figures conditioned you to believe your decisions needed their blessing to be valid. This conditioned mental prison where you police your own choices through the imagined judgment of others. You pre-explain decisions that don't require explanation. You justify boundaries that don't need justification. You defend choices that are already yours to make. The man who has broken free from this programming operates differently. He makes decisions based on his values, not others' opinions. He sets boundaries based on his needs, not their comfort. He allocates his time based on his priorities, not their expectations. This is what psychological freedom looks like. Your explanations reveal more than you realize. They show your insecurities, your pressure points, your decision-making process. They give others a detailed map of how to influence you. Every justification you offer is intelligence you're handing to people who may not have your best interests at heart. Consider how this plays out professionally. The employee who explains why he can't work weekends gets assigned weekend work. The one who simply says he's not available gets respected. The difference isn't in their capabilities, it's in their positioning. One invites negotiation, the other states reality. The same pattern repeats in every area of life. The man who explains why he won't lend money gets pressured harder. The one who simply says no gets accepted. The man who justifies his workout schedule gets interrupted more often. The one who just goes gets results. This isn't about being difficult or antisocial. It's about understanding that your life belongs to you. Your time is yours to allocate. Your energy is yours to direct. Your choices are yours to make. The moment you start explaining, you're suggesting these things might not be true. The shift from explainer to executor is a shift in identity. From someone who seeks approval to someone who lives according to his principles. From someone who argues for his choices to someone who simply makes them. From someone who defends his boundaries to someone who enforces them. Your silence is not rudeness, it's sovereignty. Your directness is not harshness, it's honesty. Your refusal to explain is not coldness, it's strength.
Most men live their entire lives explaining decisions they should simply make. They justify choices they should simply own. They defend boundaries they should simply enforce. This is the difference between living your life and seeking permission to live it. The moment you stop explaining, you'll notice something. The people who truly matter in your life don't need your explanations. They trust your judgment. They respect your boundaries. They understand that you make decisions based on principles they may not fully grasp, but they recognize as valid. The people who demand explanations are often the ones who benefit from your weakness. They want the detailed breakdown so they can find flaws in your logic. They want the justification so they can argue against it. They want the explanation so they can manipulate the next decision. Your relationships will change when you stop explaining. Some people will respect you more. Others will become frustrated and distance themselves. This sorting process is valuable. It shows you who was in your life because they respected you and who was there because they could control you. The professional implications are equally significant. Colleagues stop pressuring you when they realize your decisions aren't up for debate. Managers respect boundaries they can't argue against. Clients value decisiveness they can't manipulate. Your career advances not despite your refusal to explain, but because of it. This principle extends to every area where you currently over-explain. Your fitness routine, your social calendar, your financial choices, your relationship status, your career moves. None of these require external validation to be legitimate. None of these need consensus to be correct. The transition isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about becoming clear and direct. You can be warm while being firm. You can be kind while being definitive. You can be respectful while being uncompromising about your choices. Your explanations have been keeping you small. They've been positioning you as someone whose choices might be wrong, whose boundaries might be unreasonable, whose priorities might be invalid. This positioning has been limiting your potential and undermining your authority. The man who stops explaining starts living. He stops seeking approval and starts executing vision. He stops defending choices and starts making them count. He stops justifying his path and starts walking it with confidence. Your life is not a democracy where everyone gets a vote. It's a kingdom where you are the sole ruler. Rule accordingly.
The ultimate realization is this: explanation is the language of weakness, execution is the language of power. You've spent years speaking the wrong language, wondering why others don't respect your authority. Authority that constantly explains itself isn't authority at all. Look at men who truly command respect. They don't explain their workout schedules, they show up transformed. They don't justify their business decisions, they show results. They don't defend their boundaries, they enforce them consistently. Their lives speak louder than their explanations ever could. This is the final lesson. Your actions validate your choices better than your words ever will. When you stop explaining and start executing, you become undeniable. When you stop justifying and start achieving, you become unquestionable. When you stop defending and start succeeding, you become untouchable. The energy you've been wasting on explanations can now be redirected toward execution. The time you've been spending defending your choices can now be invested in making them count. The mental space you've been using to justify your decisions can now be used to make better ones. Your silence becomes your strength. Your directness becomes your power. Your refusal to explain becomes your signature. People learn to accept your decisions not because they understand them, but because they understand you, and they understand that your choices are final. The man who explains seeks approval. The man who executes commands respect. The man who justifies appears weak. The man who delivers appears strong. The man who defends seems uncertain. The man who achieves seems unstoppable. You have a choice to make. Continue explaining your life to people who will never understand your vision, or start living that vision so powerfully that explanation becomes unnecessary. Continue justifying your choices to people who don't share your values, or start achieving results that speak for themselves. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you start truly living. Not seeking permission to live, not arguing for the right to live, not defending your approach to living, just living. Fully, intentionally, unapologetically. Your explanations end here. Your execution begins now. Your old self sought understanding. Your new self creates reality. The difference will be everything. Stop explaining yourself. Start being yourself. The world will adjust.